Good afternoon or good morning to some of you guys on the West Coast. Thank you for joining us today for part 2 of our SAP S/4HANA A Day in the Life webinar series. My name is Rihanna Thompson and I will be your moderator for today. In today's webinar, we'll be exploring the benefits of SAP S/4HANA for procurement users or buyers. Before handing it over to today's presenter, I'd like to inform you all of a few things. This webinar is interactive, but in the interest of time, we have allocated some time for a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. If during the webinar you have any questions or concerns, simply type them into the chat while I attempt to resolve the issue on our side. All attendees will be provided with a recording of today's session tomorrow morning. With that being said, I'd like to take this moment to introduce our speaker, Darren McGregor. Darren is a solution architect at Illumity and has over 30 years of experience with SAP. I will now hand it over to Darren to share a little bit more about himself before beginning today's presentation.
Thanks, Rihanna. I hope you can hear me okay, everyone on the line. So I'm trusting that that's the case. Welcome to the Day in the Life of a Buyer for today, February 25th. Again, I'm Darren McGregor. Just an introduction to myself. I've been a logistics solution architect with Illumity for about 5 years now, and I've been in the industry for around 30 years. I live in Vancouver with my wife and a couple of English bulldogs, but I do have 2 children and 3 grandchildren, but I just show a picture of my dogs. My kids get a little upset at me, but there it is. Anyways, that's me. Okay, moving on to the agenda. So today, the key steps for the buyer purchaser. What we'll do is we'll take you through a review of some of the master data. We'll look at a material and a contract. Obviously, in S/4HANA, there's also business partners set up as vendors, and we'll be using those as well. Point 2, we'll monitor the current stock situation of a material and look at the material coverage. And so what we're trying to do is give you some tools to use so that the processing of the order is really sped up. And so people, instead of taking, an hour or 2 to create the full suite of steps within the rec to check or procure to pay process, this takes only a few minutes, and you can see how it's really been streamlined by S/4HANA. We'll look at 2A, monitor purchase recs. We'll show the approvals as well within my inbox. Everything goes through my inbox in S/4HANA. If I have time, I'll show you how to redistribute your workload as a buyer. For example, if a buyer is being too overloaded by too many requisitions or RFQs, they can always reassign to another buyer. And that's new in S/4HANA as well. We'll create the purchase order. We'll look at how easily the goods receipt is completed. Again, all through S/4HANA and using the Fiori GUI. We'll post the invoice and then show the procurement some of the overview tiles and cards, and maybe get into some procurement analytics if time allows. So that's kind of the agenda for today. Okay, so really, I've only got a few slides, and then we'll get right into the system. And I know that's what you folks are here for, is to look at the system and see what's new and so on. But I really want to introduce this and say, what are the questions we're trying to do? How do I know as a buyer what I'm supposed to do first? And some buyers wear many hats. Some buyers do a lot of different things. They don't just buy all day long and so on. They have a lot of different hats. They have to manage the RFQ process, manage requisitions, the requisitions list, manage approvals, make sure the right people are informed about the right decisions that are being made on a day-to-day basis and so on. And so some of the tools here being monitor my purchase requisitions, monitor my purchase contracts. You don't want them all. For example, you don't want all your contracts expiring in the same day or the same month. It's going to provide too much work for a buyer at any one time. You also want to monitor your purchase orders and make sure they're coming in on time. You want to expedite them. And you may or may not expedite yourself. You may have an expediting department, depending how big the company is. And then again, as I said before, we're monitoring our RFQs, and we're sorting them by the submission deadline, and we're making sure that those are going out on time and getting received on time as well, and answering any questions the vendor might have. So really, I'm answering, how am I doing? What should I do next? That's what we're trying to show here. And what I'll take you through is, we won't get through all of this today, but I'll get you through some of the major points on this. From checking the procurement overview, that's a new tile within SAP that shows a number of cards. And those cards are kind of your day-to-day activities. We'll also monitor the purchase rack. We'll check the material coverage. We'll assign the supplier or make sure it's assigned in the requisition for sourcing. Create the PO, approve. We'll probably approve the requisition this time, and then get into some of the other stuff that the warehouse and accounts payable do. But all of the stuff that the buyer does influences every step down the way. And so it starts off with the requirement or the requisition, and then it's in the buyer's hands to make sure it's all seamless from there. So these are the processes we'll go through. So what I've done is I've said, let's record all of our steps along the way. So for example, if I review a material and contract, what's the value? Whoops, I'll go back. What's the value I want to put in here? We'll record it. Once we get our material, we'll look at monitoring the material coverage. Make sure the rec is created through MRP running or material requirements planning. So a fairly simplistic scenario up front with the stock material. We'll get the requisition, get that approved through my inbox, through a manager. We'll do the PO creation, goods receipt, the invoice, and then look at the supplier invoice list and look at some KPIs at the end of the day. So I'm going to just escape out of this, and then what I'll do is I'll click on that so we can actually record our results along the way. So I'll introduce you to the S/4HANA and Fiori system now. And so if I look at it, I come to what I call a group of tiles. And this group is in the group called My Home. And My Home is something just like My Favorites in the old ECC system. So you can drag and drop, move tiles around if you want. For example, if I want this up here, I can move and drag and drop it. I can do all kinds of things with the tiles in My Home. I can actually also move tiles from another group into My Home as well. So that's a nice feature in S/4HANA and the Fiori apps, as well as I can search, and you can see all my different groups along the top. If I wanted to scroll to the right, I could do that here, scroll to the end, or I can simply move up and down and find my different groups here. Now, of course, me as a presenter, I've got many hats I have to wear. I have to wear a manager's hat, an accounts payable hat, a goods receiver or a warehouse clerk's hat, and I have to be able to show you kind of end to end. So that's why I have so many different tiles and groups on my system that I'm showing. Most of you would not have that many if you're in day-to-day operations. Okay, so the very first step we said we wanted to do was I wanted to look at my material master and my purchase contracts. So let's go ahead and do that. Maybe before I do that, what I'll do is I'll say, what's the need? And so if I go into my procurement overview, again, I'm trying to solve what I'm doing in a day-to-day basis. And what am I doing now? What am I doing next? What am I doing well? What's not looking so good on my dashboard? And so this is called the procurement overview screen. And it's got 14 different, what they call cards, like playing cards or cards in the system. And it starts with monitoring your purchase contracts. You've got supplier performance, monitor purchase order items, non-managed spend, purchasing spend, and so on, all the way through the list here with 14 of them. The very first one that comes up, it says, hey, I've got a contract expiring in 1 month. I've got a contract expiring in 3 days, and I've got one coming up in 10 months. So what I could do as a buyer is I could say, okay, well, let's look at this contract in 3 days. So I select that, and it actually takes me into the contract itself. And what I want to do is I actually want to show you some of the items that are on the contract, and should show you some of the features within the actual contract itself. So it gives me a consumption percentage. It shows me how I've released things over the last few months, and also the items on the contract. So these are my 2 items on the contract. I've got RM1, some raw material on my contract. A new thing in S4HANA as well is legal transactions. So for example, if you have any documentation like legal documents, all your terms and conditions, that's where we would put them in the contract now. It's called legal transactions. Okay, so that's the contract. I don't have a whole lot of time to spend on each one of these things in depth. We could do a session on each one of these, I'm sure. So I'll look at my RM55 material. I know my contract, it needs to be updated within 3 days. But it's still valid, is my point. So if I go back again to my home, and what I want to do is I want to look in depth at that raw material now that I see it's on the contract. I actually want to look at it and see what monitor the material coverage of it to see what I've got on hand. So if I go to my monitor material coverage tile here in my material and production planning group, I select that. And it takes me into the actual detail of my different materials that I'm responsible for. Now I know what material I'm looking for, but at a glance here, you can see on the right-hand side the stock availability. Green is good, red is bad. And so you want to see which material should I be acting on today. And even if they're good, they might just have a material requisition for them ready to go. So you've kind of got to look to all of these materials and decide what you want to do with them. My material, I'll just search for it up here, RM55, raw material 55. I put it in this search box, and it goes through all the different lines and all the different things and tries to find my material for me. And it comes up and it says it's available. Well, let's look at it. So I select that material line, and I go into Manage Materials on the bottom right. And what this does is it actually gives me kind of an overview, almost like the stock requirements list. And some of you have used this in the past. When you run MRP, you look at MD04, the stock requirements list, and this is similar to that. So I see I've got my requisition. I've got safety stock of 10 pieces that is bringing it down to 0, and I've got 40 pieces on the requisition. So there is a need to actually order this. I've got only 10 pieces on hand. And if I look at my material info, I can actually open this and go to the stock requirements list as well, and it calls the old MD04 transaction. So I go to the back and I see that. And it pulls up MD04 with all the right information on it. And so we can see what's really truly happening with the material and why it's proposing that we order 40 from the MRP run. Just take a second to refresh. And there we go. So we're reading the data. So we see here, there's my requisition. I can see in the top here that it's an MRP item. Its MRP type is HB, which is reorder to max stock. My maximum stock level is 50 and my reorder point is 25. My safety stock is 10. Okay. Go back to my actual stock requirements list. I can order it from here. But let's double check to make sure it's approved. So the requisition is 7745. So I come down here and I go into, as a manager, I've logged in. And everything goes through my inbox for approvals in S4HANA, which is really nice. And the manager now has got the manager hat on, and my first rec that pops up, I've got a couple of them here, 7743. There's 7745 that's coming up. It's a medium priority, nothing too great, and it's for 40 pieces in that. And so my requisition release date was, I think that's Friday, the 21st. Is that right? Yeah, Friday the 21st. And so what I want to do is I can approve it. I can reject it as a manager. I can show the approval log to see if anybody else has been approving it along the way. Something kind of cool is that I can claim it. For example, if I don't want to approve it right now, but I want to claim it and there's other approvers that could potentially approve this, I can actually claim this for myself. Or I could forward it to somebody else, or I could suspend it. So lots of different options here. Obviously today I'm just going to approve it in interest of time and then put in my note, approved for order. And I'll submit that. And I had 40 items in my task list. Now I hit refresh. And there's 39 here showing. And if I go back out, that changes to 39 as well in my inbox. So this is all real time. Obviously, everything is, as soon as you process it, it's updating all the different statistics and the different KPIs and so on. Okay, so that requisition was 7745. Let's make sure we record that. So requisition created, 1, 1, 2, 3, 7745. I looked at the material coverage and I looked at the contract. 46. Okay, the requisition is now approved. And it's PO creation time. If I go back into the system, into me as I'm a buyer, I can actually take it from here. And this is some new functionality right in 1909. You could actually create a purchase order from MD04, or you can create a purchase order from, the advanced PO create transaction, ME21N. That's in ECC. We still call that. Or I can do it right from here in my material requirements. Since I know that it's now approved, I can refresh that. And I'll just wait for that to refresh. And I can go into the edit button here. I can edit the actual purchase rec. Or me as a buyer, I can convert it. So what I'd like to do is just press convert. Let's see if I get a good result today. Current date, delivery date, and 40 pieces. I'm okay with that. The contractor is Pace and subcontractor, and so I'll say okay. We'll let the system save it, and it'll update it, and should provide us with our purchase order number that's going back in the back end and doing. So all of a sudden it refreshed. There you saw it. And now my requisition says it's processed in the top left. And I've got a PO item now for it, 45,457. So let's populate our screen, 45,457. And it's item 10. So I've got that. We could go look at the purchase order itself. So let's come back out of here. And come back one more. And I'll go to my home this time. So I'm back at my home. I actually want to look at the actual purchase order. And so I'll go this time into purchase order processing, into that group. And I can go into create change. I should have a display here, but I'll go into change. And you'll notice that this calls up, so some of these are real Fiori tiles. Some call up the transaction from the background, from the back end. And my PO, if I go to other PO, it's 457. Other document. And then I see my raw material, and there's no PO history on it yet. So everything's been done because it was on a contract and because it had a source list and an info record. Those are all master data pieces that are set up in the background to make the purchasing process a lot faster. And so you can see how you could save processing time, especially on stock items that are no value add. For example, if this was a C item and I wasn't adding any value as a buyer to go into the PO and process it manually, I just allowed the system to automatically make the purchase order based on the click. Just say, yes, go ahead and convert. So kind of nice functionality there. So I'll go back out of here. And the next thing I want to do is I want to do the warehouse processing piece, goods receipt. So now I have to put on my warehouse hat, and I'm a warehouse clerk or warehouse storekeeper or whatever it is in your organization. So I'll go to warehouse processing. And you have a number of tiles in that group as well. And so for processing the purchase order, you go to post goods receipt. And of course, depending on how well the purchase order is set up, really influences how, is it packed properly, was it shipped properly, all these different things that affect the warehouse folks. I can start typing my material, my PO 45. Oops. $457 is my PO, and it's down here, so I select that. And this does look similar to Migo, although it is its own Fiori, true Fiori tile, and true Fiori GUI on it as well. So I can put in a bill of lading. You can put in some notes, delivery note. And then here it's saying, it's proposing that I receive the full 40 quantity. And I say, yeah, that's good. I like that. And if I want, if there was any attachments here, I could add a link or add an attachment. For example, the bill of lading I could add here, or I could add a link to the actual bill of lading online, depending on where I've got it stored. And I can go into the detail of the item by clicking the right arrow here. And here it gives me additional information, for example, an unloading point, some short text, and a goods recipient. And so here I want to make sure I'm bringing it into my storage location 1, and then it brings up my bin location. That's kind of nice. And I apply that, and here I'm ready to post that. So fairly straightforward on the receiving side, but kind of a nice tile to be using, and you can use this on handheld devices as well. So we'll wait for the system to give us our document number, and then we'll record that in our documents we've got so far. Thinking about it really hard. And you can also print these off as well. You know that they're printable. You know, most of the people print them and they file them with the packing slip, and you've always got a record of them that stays with the purchase order as well. So we'll wait for this to stop thinking so hard. And there's my document, one material document posted. There's my goods receipt document, 5.87, 187. Let me record that really quick. And if I open it in the material documents overview, this is kind of neat functionality as well, that the system has given us a process flow and shows us all the documents that are tied together. And so I wanted to make sure I showed you that, so you see some of the new functionalities in SAP. So now I've got my purchase order, I've got my goods receipt document, and I also have my accounting document, and they're all tied together. And then when we do the invoice will be there as well, so that we can see all of the different documents tied together. And that stays with the document for the life of that purchase order, which is really nice. So I can click on any one of these and go into the details of them, as you can see when they get highlighted. Okay, if we wanted to do some more purchase order receipts, we could do that. I've recorded that. I want to now record the invoice for that PO. So this time I'm going to put on my accounts payable hat and go into supplier invoice processing. And again, depending on how the buyer set up the PO and how the goods receipt is done, we're doing a three-way match. So goods receipt, PO, and invoice, that's the three-way match. And in order for the accounts payable clerk to pay the bill, it has to be received. So goods receipt based invoice verification is what it's called. So I can create my supplier invoice here under the create supplier invoice tile. And again, a Fiori app that they've developed for this, which is really nice. And of course, the very first thing you put in is your purchase order. We know it's going to be an invoice for that company code. The invoice date is today. I'm going to put today's date in there. You could backdate this and so on, depending on when you received the invoice. So that's that. They brought in the invoicing party, and now it says my amount at the balance at the top left is 54.08. So if I put in my gross invoice amount, 54.08, and I press check. Now it's green, and the balance is zero, so that's a good sign. So I want to be able to just pay that. The amount is $52 each times $40. There's a tax code and so on. I'm going to go ahead and save that as completed, or post it. Now, depending on the time that you, like I bought this and received it the same day, and so it's saying it's been blocked for payment because my payment terms are probably not net 30 days on this. So it blocks it and says you don't need to pay it quite yet. So there's a cash management feature, obviously, in SAP. You want to create, and then it asks you, do you want to create a new supplier invoice? And I'll just say no. But it's given me the document number. So if I go back to my purchase order itself and go into the advanced area this time, I see now I've got a PO history of, there's the purchase order, 45,457. There's my goods receipt document, the WE document type, and the RE document type for the invoice. So it's all matched. So that's a nice thing about that. Forgot to get the document number. Let's go back there and get that document number so we can record it. 21250-217 this time. Copy that. And paste it in here, 51. Hold that to make it consistent. Okay. Okay, so we've seen our contract. We've seen the material, monitor material coverage. We saw how the requisition was created by looking at the material coverage. We looked at our PO creation, and we did the goods receipt and the invoice. And now we can look at our supplier invoice list if we want to do that. Then I'll get into some analytics. Okay, supplier invoice list. Again, under my supplier invoice processing. And the reason I'm showing you this is because it's a new tile as well. So you can see the supplier invoice list. There's 179 invoices. And you can report on this via company code, via the invoicing party, and so on. And I'll just put in company code 1710. Posting date, I'll just put in today's date actually. Today's date, then go. So somebody else has been playing around with the system with some drafts, but there's my document there itself, and I can always select it. And go to it as well. Gives me the PO reference, what PO it's on, any tax, the payment, any unplanned delivery costs, and then of course attachments. Okay. All right, back to home. Got my document, my supplier invoice list. Yes, look at that. It showed up there. Now, we filled out all those kind of rec to check basics. I just want to take you through some of the reviewing KPIs and reviewing the procurement overview and analytics. And so, as I mentioned in the past, the procurement overview, we saw that initially. That's kind of what I'm doing day to day. I'm looking at that, monitoring that, see where most of my work has to be done. So as we did before, I just selected a contract last time. It's due in 3 days. If I actually wanted to update that, I can go into monitor purchase contract just by selecting the header of that tile or that card. And it will bring up all of my different contracts and the different statuses and so on. So I get a real good overview of what's happening. And so I see there's my 46-1. It's expiring, so is this one, but this one's in 28 days. If I wanted to, if I was authorized to do this, I can renew the contract right from here. I know that the process is usually you're going out for bid and so on, but if I had a contract that I negotiated that it could be a possibility of 1 or 2 years and I want to extend it for another year, I can just simply go in and renew the contract right here in this tile. And it says valid to 0221. I'll say 21, and I'll leave the target value as it is. And I'll say renew. So now it refreshes and it takes it out of the expiring list, and I've got just one other contract I've got to deal with. So just showing you some quick ways of how the system, how SAP has really developed some of the tools that, you don't have to be so complex in updating contracts and so on, especially if you're just doing the due dates. So I see now it's 1 month for the domestic supplier. Now I'm 1 year away in my Ferguson I'll just show you some of the other tiles here. Non-managed spend, spend that's not on any contract. You've got purchase requisition item types. For example, are they catalog items? Are they materials? Are they free text? You have touch rates. What's the touch rate for the buyer? High touch rate, it's got 17 in this case. And then a lot of supplier performance monitoring. This one wasn't set up with the question and score. No delivery schedules in the system. And then there's our monitor RFQs. And RFQs has been reworked in S4HANA as well. So it's got a little bit more robust functionality in that you can publish a bid and things like this. In ECC, it was just, you set up the quote, typically for stock items was the best approach. You could do it for non-stock, but it's very basic in what you can use in it. And then, so they've really updated this, the RFQs process. And then off-contract spend. It doesn't have a contract, but somebody's spending off-contract. So you can catch your culprits. I go back out of here. The other thing SAP has done that I wanted to show you, since we do have a little bit of time, is they put in all their analytics. It used to be all on one slide, like I'll show you in my PowerPoint. They used to have all of their analytics like this in one kind of a KPI overview group. And so what they've done now in 1909 is they've divided them up into groups themselves. So they have purchasing analytics for purchase recs, for purchase orders, contracts, invoices, and so on. And they've added a new group, purchasing analytics for reporting. And these can be really, and you see procurement overview is even in here. So it's duplicated a couple of times where they put it. A material price variance, purchasing group activity. I'll just go into this really quickly and just show you some of the functionality around the reporting analytics. So this is by purchasing group. And I was picking on 300 for the last little while, so you can see the number of orders, number of contracts, number of deliveries, and so on has really gone up in that area because I've been using the system quite a bit to do demos and things like that, and I always pick on purchasing group 300. If you wanted to, you can look at it in a tabular view. So for example, purchasing group for this has a number of contracts, number of orders, scheduling agreements, and so on. And if I wanted to delve into it, I could look at documents within that. And so number of orders, contracts, number of deliveries, quantity received, invoice amount, net amount. And at any time when you're satisfied that you've got, you know, what you want in terms of the report, you can download it, export to Excel. And it's fetching data from the server, and it's usually Excel in place. You don't have to go through all those different steps in order to get this downloaded. And so it becomes very useful very quickly, and then you can send it out to somebody, talk to them about it. Why is buyer group number one got, you know, so many orders, or number of contracts is really light, we've only got 5 here, and so on. You can start to see where you can really start to analyze the workload. Okay. Let me close that, back to that. And back to my home. And so basically, I'll just get back to the PowerPoint presentation. Those were the things I wanted to show you today. I know it was a very quick session, around 40 minutes or so. But what we'd like to do is, you know, if you have any opinions of what you want to see in the future as well, that would be great as well, just to submit them to myself or Rihanna. And Rihanna, I'm probably going to hand it back to you here, and maybe we could open it up to see if there are any questions. I don't know if there are any or not.
We actually do have a few questions to go through, so we can definitely switch over to the Q&A.
Okay.
First question that we have from Kajan is the My Inbox alone enough to approve a requisition, or do you need the underlying app to approve the PR?
Yeah, so you would need the app itself as well. Obviously, the app, My Inbox, is the application or the app, the tile. And then underneath that, there is some configuration and some workflow required to make that happen, to get this moving, but it's minimal. And so you'd work with your developer, or if you're a developer, you'd work with the release procedures in SAP and in the MM module, get those up and running based on value or the class or whatever it is. We just based ours on value. And there is a couple of steps from the developer side to get the workflow going, and potentially from basis to make sure the app is working.
Okay. Kajan had a second part to the question where it's being asked, does that functionality apply to, does the question above apply to any other functions as well where you would require the app?
Yeah, I mean, mostly within the app, you have things like I've got an invoice in here, I've got purchase recs, I'll have purchase orders. Anything that you want to approve through My Inbox has to go through that, has to be developed for My Inbox, and they have to have access to My Inbox. But most of the stuff that I've seen in S4HANA directly goes through My Inbox for approvals. It's no more, it's centralized is the point that I'm trying to make.
Okay. The next question comes from Jeff. What are some of the main navigational differences in S4HANA 1909 that you have noticed?
So the navigational differences, I was trying to point them out originally, but what happens is you have a number of ways to navigate around the system. For example, you have My Home, and then you have MRP and purchase orders, and these are all called groups. But if I go to My Home and I select Home up top here, Home Apps, it brings up all of the different groups that I have, and if I wanted to select and go into them, I could go into them right from here rather than having to figure out where it was in my actual screen. So I see MRP, there's all the different apps I've got there, inventory and receiving, purchase contracts, and so on. And I can quickly go into these and say, oh, okay, show me let's manage my purchase contracts. So rather than have to navigate through the actual tiles and groups themselves, you can do it from the My Home space. And then this gives you the full list of all the different contracts, expired, expiring, valid, and so on. So it's really nice, and then takes you back right to My Home again, and you can go home and just use this as a navigational tool. The other thing was that SAP has done is now put all the user defaults kind of over on the top right here where you see the little figurine. If you select that, it says who your user ID is, what your settings are, and anything I wanted to do on the home page, I could edit my home page with new tiles and so on. But on the settings, I can set my appearance. And I'm in the Deep Belize theme. I knew that one that came out was high contrast white. If I did that and I saved that, it really changed the appearance. I mean, that to me is really shocking. So I don't know if I like that. You got to play with it. It's up to you as the user, right? But SAP came up with that new one, and I was like, okay. It's like art. Some people like it, some people don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are kind of the major navigational differences.
Okay. The next question comes from Pankaj. Can you please share Ariba-mediated procurement features? I think it's actually a question surrounding also SAP's discussing CLM integration for contract and guided by features. Do you know any additional information on that, Darren?
I don't. I haven't got a chance to review that portion of the system. But I know I know they were actually having a presentation today that I was trying to get privy to. But we could take that away and definitely get back to them on that. Okay,
perfect. We have another question from Kajan. Can you confirm that the attachments can be set up either to the database or external repository like OpenText?
Yeah, like OpenText or like SharePoint or wherever. That's right. That's exactly what they're for.
Okay, awesome. We got one more question from David. Are the analytics that much different in S/4HANA 1909?
Yeah, they are. They're quite a bit different, and I'll just show you one. All of these are very similar, like purchase order, purchase analytics, purchase orders, contracts, invoices. The one that's different is this purchase analytics for reports. So, not that the procurement overview one is, but they've added material price variance. They've added purchasing spend report. I don't know why it's on here twice, and service spend report. And so what you do is if you select those reports, you can actually go into them, and they're like a pivot table. If it comes up here, I'll be able to show you. But it's similar to a pivot table, and I want to do it in euros year to date. That's fine. And I can report on these different dimensions and columns. So I can have, you know, maybe it's a calendar week as my columns, and purchase order as my row. I don't know, something like that. But you see how you start to drag and drop these, and you can see, oh, this purchase order was in this week, these POs in here, and so on. And you can start to get a feel for how busy you were in certain weeks and so on. Or you can decide, you know, I really want to I'd rather look at account assignments rather than POs, or I'd rather look at the full year or within a certain cost center and so on. And you can really start to develop this as almost like a pivot table, as I said. And then you can get this downloaded to Excel, and you can play with it further. But yeah, these purchasing spend, service spend, and requests for quotation types are all brand new in 1909.
Okay. Well, Darren, that's the last of the questions we have for today. I want to first thank you again for giving this presentation. I'd also like to thank everyone for joining us today for part 2 of our SAP S/4HANA A Day in the Life webinar series on procurement users. The recording for today's webinar will be provided to all attendees tomorrow morning. I'd also like to encourage you all to register for part 3 of this series, where we'll be exploring the day in the life of a finance user. For those of you who have already registered, please expect to receive an email containing your calendar invite for part 3 tomorrow as well. If you have any additional questions for Darren after today's presentation, feel free to send those over via the email that will be provided to you afterwards. And thank you again for all joining us today, and I hope you have a great day.